He called him just a delivery guy. He had no idea the man he insulted actually owned the entire company. He pushed open the glass door with a calm, steady hand. The conference room was freezing, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the energy inside. 12 executives sat around a long, polished oak table. Laptops open, diamond cufflinks flashing, fake confidence leaking from their eyes. In the middle of the room stood a chair obviously meant for the important person. But he didn't walk toward it. Not yet. In his hand, a single black folder. No brand, no logo, no flex. Just a folder that held more power than anyone in that room realized. The executives barely looked up. The man closest to the door, expensive suit, combed back hair, ego dripping from his smile, finally noticed him. He leaned back in his leather chair and said loudly, almost performative so the room could hear, "Deliveries are through the loading dock." The other smirked. He continued louder now, pretending to joke. "This is a boardroom, not the mailroom." A few people chuckled, not because it was funny, but because they wanted to laugh at his jokes. That's how corporate hierarchies work. Not real respect, just fear wearing a tie. But the man with the folder didn't react. He didn't defend himself. He didn't get angry. He didn't explain who he was. He simply looked at the executive. Not with shock, not with pain, but with a kind of silent disappointment. Like he had seen this 1,000 times. The executive wasn't done. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes sharp with arrogance. "Whatever documents you're carrying," he said, "hand them to the receptionist. She'll file them." The black man didn't blink. Instead, he walked slowly, calmly toward the table. His footsteps were soft, but somehow they echoed. He placed the folder precisely in front of the executive. No anger, no emotion, just a quiet, intentional movement. The executive looked puzzled. "I said, deliveries go to the loading dock." He lifted the folder with 2 fingers, as if it was beneath him to even touch it. The black man didn't move. He stood tall, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady and calm. The kind of calm that makes the other person uncomfortable. Another executive across the table whispered, a bit too loudly, "Must be lost. This level isn't open to staff without authorization." Someone else laughed, and that laugh was the moment the energy in the room shifted. A quiet tension began spreading, like everyone sensed something was off, but couldn't describe it. The black man spoke for the first time. His voice steady, low, controlled. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He didn't explain further. He didn't correct them. He didn't defend his presence. He just watched. The executive tapped the folder. "Listen," he said, smirking. "We're minutes away from signing a huge corporate contract. No distractions. No interruptions. No deliveries." The black man nodded once. Slow, deliberate. He pulled out a chair, not the power seat. Just a random chair on the side of the table, and sat down calmly, like he belonged there, like he owned the silence. The executive scoffed. "You're sitting? Do you even know what room this is?" He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, full of confidence he hadn't earned. The black man didn't look at him. He looked at the city skyline outside the glass wall. He had built some of those towers. He knew the weight of a decision, the value of silence, the price of ego. He finally turned his head and looked at the executive, not with anger, with pity. "Rooms don't decide importance," he said. "People do." The boardroom froze, because suddenly the power didn't feel like it belonged to the executives anymore. It belonged to the calm man with the folder. The man who didn't raise his voice. The man who didn't try to prove anything. He already knew who he was. He slid the folder back across the table, not aggressively, just firmly, like returning responsibility to where it belonged. The executive stared at it, his confidence slightly cracked, and for the first time, the room was quiet enough to feel the tension. Not because the man with the folder was loud, but because he wasn't. Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it enters the room silently and waits for everyone else to realize it. The executive tapped the folder again, annoyed that the man hadn't reacted. He spoke louder now, making sure the entire boardroom could hear him. Not because he needed to, but because he needed an audience. "If you're looking for work," he said slowly, enunciating every word as if he were speaking to someone beneath him, "the warehouse is hiring. A couple of executives chuckled under their breath. The black man lifted his eyes toward him. No anger, no shock, just disappointment. The kind of disappointment that hits harder than rage. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend himself. He didn't correct the man. He simply held eye contact. And that eye contact made the executive blink. Because nothing is more threatening than someone who refuses to react. Someone who stays calm, even when everyone expects them to break. The black man slowly opened the folder. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just with controlled, quiet purpose. Inside was a stack of neatly arranged documents, precise and intentional. As he separated one sheet from the pile, everyone noticed something strange. His hand didn't shake. Most people tremble when they're being scrutinized, humiliated, judged. He didn't. He handled the paper with the steady confidence of a man who didn't need to prove himself. The executive leaned back in his chair again, arms crossed. Seriously, man, you don't have to pretend. He smirked. We've all been there, just trying to get a foot in the door. The black man placed one sheet of paper on the glossy wooden table. Not roughly, not defensively, just placed it, gently, and pushed it toward the executive with 2 fingers. Slow, controlled, almost surgical. The sound of the document sliding across the polished table echoed in the silent boardroom. SSSHHHHKK. Every head turned. Even the ones pretending to be busy on their laptops were now staring at the paper. The executive didn't pick it up. He stared at it like it might bite him. What's this supposed to be? He asked, chuckling nervously. No response. The black man just watched him. His silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate. The executive scoffed. Look, whatever this is, give it to HR or... The black man's voice finally entered the room. Soft, measured, almost too calm. Read it. The room froze. There was no threat in his tone, no aggression, but the authority in his voice. It was impossible to ignore. The executive swallowed, annoyed that someone had just spoken to him, as if he were the subordinate. He snatched the paper up. He began reading with the same smug expression. And then, the expression faded. His eyebrows pulled together. He blinked. He read the same line again. Then a third time. The laughter around the table died instantly. Someone whispered from across the room. What does it say? The executive didn't answer. Because he couldn't. He was too busy trying to process the line on the page. Transfer of controlling ownership, effective immediately. His face turned pale. He flipped to the second page, then the third. Every page had signatures. Real signatures. And a stamp. A notary stamp. A legal stamp. Not a joke. Not a prank. Not a misunderstanding. The black man watched him quietly. No pride. No smirk. Just patience. The executive finally spoke, but his voice was no longer confident. It cracked. Is this real? The black man tilted his head slightly, and for the first time, he let a small, controlled smile touch his lips. Not a boastful smile. A knowing one. The kind of smile that says, you should have thought before you spoke. The executive tried to recover. He laughed, awkward, shaky. Okay, funny. Who sent you? Someone from legal. The black man didn't speak. He just held the man's gaze. And it hit the executive like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't staged. This was real. A different executive, a woman with sharp glasses and sharper instincts, leaned forward. She reached for the document herself. The first executive tried to hold it back. He couldn't. She snatched it from his hand. As her eyes moved across the page, her face changed instantly. From arrogance, to shock, to panic. She gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God, he's not delivering anything. Everyone turned to her. He's the new controlling shareholder. Chairs creaked. Someone dropped a pen. The room that once echoed with laughter now drowned in fear. The executive who insulted him cleared his throat nervously. Listen about earlier. The black man didn't let him finish. He raised one hand. Not aggressively. Just enough to silence him. And it worked. The same man who thought he held the power couldn't speak a full sentence anymore. Because now, he wasn't speaking to a delivery guy. He was speaking to the man who held his job in a signature. He was speaking to the man who owned the table he was sitting at. He was speaking to power. Quiet power. Real power. The black man leaned forward slightly, looked the executive directly in the eyes, and said calmly, "Positions don't give you value. Character does." Silence. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and the entire room stood with him. Not because they wanted to, but because respect is no longer optional. When power is in front of you. The executive's fingers trembled as he picked up the paper, the same paper he had mocked just seconds ago. But now, he held it like an explosive device. He scanned the first page, line by line, and the color drained from his face. He swallowed hard, but his throat was dry. His voice cracked. This is a purchase contract." The entire room froze. No one blinked. No one breathed. Even the air stopped moving. Chairs creaked as heads turned toward the black man. No reaction. No emotion. Just calm, too calm. A woman near the projector leaned closer, whispering, "A purchase what?" The executive licked his lips, his confidence evaporating. He read aloud again. "Transfer of majority ownership, effective immediately." His voice sounded small now, weak, like it belonged to someone else. The assistant standing near the glass wall dropped her tablet. Clack! It echoed through the boardroom like a gunshot. Her eyes widened. She stared at the man everyone had assumed was a delivery worker. "Wait." Her voice cracked too. "You bought the company." The black man didn't gloat. He didn't grin. He just nodded once. Slow. Controlled. The assistant's jaw dropped, and she staggered backward. Executives exchanged glances, shocked, confused, terrified. Someone whispered, "Impossible. Companies like this don't just get bought." But the documents said otherwise. The executive flipped the next page with shaking hands. He skimmed the legal stamps, the wiring records, the signatures from the previous owners. He blinked rapidly. His ego fought reality, but reality won. He forced a laugh. A nervous, cracking, broken laugh. No, this has to be some mistake." He slapped the paper lightly, as if trying to wake himself up. "This company is worth..." The black man finished his sentence. $710 million. Everyone froze again. Even the HVAC seemed to shut off to listen. He knew the number. Down to the unit. Down to the cent. The executive stared at him like he was seeing him for the first time. How could you possibly afford? The woman with the glasses cut him off sharply. She could see the full contract now. "He didn't buy shares," she whispered, stunned. "He bought the entire controlling interest." Silence. Then she read the line out loud. "Including all executive-level decision authority, asset control, and board power." Her voice shook. Not from fear. From respect. The executive who insulted him started stammering. "Sir, I didn't know. We didn't know who you..." He couldn't speak. He couldn't even breathe. Because suddenly, the hierarchy of the room had flipped. The man they mocked, the man they underestimated, the man they didn't bother to understand, was now their boss. Their future. Their signatures. Their fate. The black man walked around the table slowly, hands in his pockets. Not rushed. Not performing. Just present. Commanding without needing to command. He stopped right behind the executive who insulted him, leaned slightly forward, and looked at the contract resting in his hands. "I didn't buy this company to prove anything." His voice was steady, measured. The executive looked up at him, throat tight. The black man continued, "I bought it because your culture wastes talent." Murmurs spread across the boardroom. He turned and addressed everyone now. "I've watched this company reject people who think differently. I've watched good ideas die here, because the wrong person suggested them." The assistant spoke softly. "So, you're changing things?" He nodded. "Starting today." He gestured toward the contract. "Those papers give me control of every department, every budget, every seat at this table." Then he leaned forward slightly. His tone whisper calm, the kind that demands attention. "Power doesn't come from being in charge." He tapped his temple lightly. "Power comes from being in control of yourself." The executive who mocked him earlier finally broke. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. "Listen, I didn't mean anything. We were just joking. I didn't realize." The black man raised a hand. A small gesture. But the room went silent again. He walked toward the window, the city below glowing through the glass. He spoke without turning around. You treated me according to what you saw, not according to who I am. He inhaled deeply. When he turned back, his eyes were calm, sharp, unshakable. Here's the twist. His voice dropped to a deeper tone. I didn't walk into this building hoping to be treated with respect. He stepped closer to the executive. I walked in knowing I own the building. Gasps. The assistant covered her mouth with both hands. Another executive sat down slowly, overwhelmed. The man continued. Respect isn't something I need from you. He tapped the contract. It's something that comes with the position. Then he leaned back slightly. But character, that's earned. The room was silent. Not fearful now. Humbled. The man gathered the remaining documents and placed them neatly back in the folder. He buttoned his jacket again, the symbol of finality. And then, in one quiet sentence, he ended the conversation. Meeting adjourned. He walked out, and not a single person dared say another word. The executive swallowed hard. Whatever confidence he had left slipped through his fingers like water. His Adam's apple jumped up and down as he forced the words out, barely holding himself together. What does this mean for me? His voice sounded nothing like the arrogant tone from earlier. This one trembled. This one begged. The black man stood slowly, without hurry, without effort. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, straightened his jacket, and buttoned it with calm precision, like a man who knew the world would wait for him. He looked at the executive, not with anger, not with revenge, but with absolute clarity. It means your leadership style ends today. A wave of silence hit the room, heavier than anything that had been said before. The executive blinked, eyes wide, uncertain if he heard correctly. My leadership style, he repeated, voice thin. The man took a slow step toward him. With every step, the room felt smaller. The ceiling felt lower. The power shifted. Everyone watched the walk. They could feel authority moving without a single raised voice. You lead with power, he said. I lead with respect. The executive's gaze bounced from face to face, searching for help, support, rescue, anything. But no one moved. The same people who laughed moments ago now avoided eye contact. They didn't laugh with him. They only laughed at someone else's expense, and now that the balance had changed, so did their loyalty. The executive tried to salvage himself. Listen, if I offended you. The man raised one hand. A simple, small gesture, but it shut him up instantly. You didn't offend me, he said. You exposed yourself. A few gasps slipped from the board members seated around the table. The words were sharp, clean cuts, not wild swings. The man continued, voice steady, calm, unwavering. You think authority is something you force on people, he said, tapping his own chest lightly. I know authority is something people give you because you've earned it. The executive's eyes dropped. For the first time, he wasn't looking at the man he misjudged. He was looking at himself through the reflection of someone who refused to be reduced. I watched this company ignore talent, the man continued. I watched it silence new ideas, reject potential, reward egos, and punish vision. Someone at the table shifted uncomfortably. No one dared interrupt. You don't build a legacy by stepping on others, he said. You build it by lifting people higher. The executive's voice was barely a whisper now. So what happens now? The man stepped back, giving him space, not because the executive deserved it, but because the man carried himself with dignity. He looked at the contract on the table, then at the room, then at the culture. You're done here. The executive jerked up from his chair, desperate now. You can't just fire me. The man tilted his head, almost curious. Then he reached for the contract and tapped his signature. Below it, in bold legal language, it was written, full executive control and termination authority. The executive staggered back as if those words had physically shoved him. Murmurs rippled through the room. If he could be removed, anyone could. The realization washed over them. The man spoke clearly, not shouting, not gloating. Positions can be replaced. He paused, just long enough for the words to settle. Character can't. That line didn't raise his voice, but it cut deeper than any scream could have. The executive looked around the room for support again. Nobody looked back. He had spent years building fear, not respect. Fear disappears the moment power shifts. Respect stays. The man turned and began walking toward the door. No drama, no rushing, just peace. But before leaving, he paused in the doorway. We don't need people who lead with fear. He locked eyes with the executive. We need people who lead with vision. He didn't have to shout. He didn't have to threaten. His voice carried the weight of someone who ran the room without owning the arrogance of it. He took a breath and finished with quiet finality. Security will collect your badge. The executive froze. The room didn't. People began moving, packing documents, whispering not about him, but about the future. For the first time, they saw leadership. Not ego. They saw respect. Not intimidation. They saw someone who didn't step on people to get to the top. The man walked out of the boardroom. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Not loud. Not dramatic. He picked up the folder, tucking the final signed documents inside with a level of calmness that felt unreal in a room that had just witnessed an earthquake. The executives sat frozen, their minds still trying to process the shift in power, a shift that had taken only a few sentences, a signature, and a truth none of them were prepared for. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look proud. He didn't look angry. He looked free. The soles of his shoes echoed against the polished floor as he walked toward the glass double doors. The sound was steady, confident, controlled. Every step held weight, not the weight of ego, but the weight of purpose. Behind him, the executive, now pale, small, powerless, took a step forward. "Yes, sir, please. I didn't mean any harm. I didn't know who you were." The man didn't turn. He didn't slow down. He didn't need to respond to excuses. He had heard excuses from people like him his entire life. Every step reminded the room of one thing. He didn't need to raise his voice to raise the standard. The executives sitting closest to the table shifted awkwardly, gathering their notepads and laptops, suddenly aware of how quickly loyalty changes when respect enters the room. They watched him walk toward the exit as if he were walking out of their future, a future they no longer controlled. He reached the door. His hand rested lightly on the stainless steel handle. A symbol of departure, yes, but also a symbol of arrival. He paused, letting silence sit on the room like fog. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. They finally understood that the loudest person in the room isn't always the one in power. Without turning back, he spoke, his voice calm, powerful, and sharp enough to leave scar. Never judge someone. You could hear pens stop moving. You could hear breaths being held. You could feel hearts sinking, while standing on ground you don't own. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried the weight of every moment he had ever been underestimated. Every door that was shut in his face. Every assumption made based on his appearance. Every whisper behind his back. Every smirk in rooms like this one. The executive's knees softened. Ground you don't own. The simplicity of the sentence annihilated the arrogance of an entire culture. He finally turned just enough for the room to see the side of his face, calm, composed, untouchable. He looked at the man who insulted him, but not with anger. He looked at him the way you look at a lesson you've finally outgrown. "You thought you stood above me," he said softly, "but you were only standing on borrowed floors." The executive blinked rapidly, swallowing a lump of shame. His voice came out broken. "I didn't know." The man nodded slightly, not out of agreement, but acknowledgement. "That's the point." He walked out. The door closed with a gentle click, no slam, no drama. But to the people inside, that sound was louder than a gunshot. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Outside the boardroom, the hallway felt wider, brighter, lighter. A receptionist, who had watched the entire scene unfold from a distance, looked at him with awe. Not because he was powerful now, but because he had been dignified even when nobody believed he had power at all. He gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "I see you." She smiled, the kind of smile that comes from witnessing justice with your own eyes. He walked toward the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The soft chime echoed. The doors opened. He stepped inside and turned around slowly, watching the hallway shrink as the elevator doors prepared to close. Just before they did, he whispered, not to the executives, but to himself. Respect doesn't recognize status. It recognizes character. The doors shut. No applause. No music. No celebration. Just closure. Inside the boardroom, The executive's legs finally gave out, and he slumped into a chair. For the first time in his life, he understood something that his title had blinded him from. Power isn't having a seat at the table. Power is being the reason the table exists. The man in the elevator didn't win because he bought the company. He won because he never became them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to prove anything. He just walked away. And that was the real victory. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps steady, calm, and filled with purpose. Never judge someone while standing on ground you don't own. The executive's shoulders slumped, realization washing over him. The boardroom was silent, every person understanding the truth of his words. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to fight. Power spoke for itself. He reached the doors, touched the handle lightly, and turned his gaze just enough to leave one final message. Respect isn't earned from fear, it's earned from character. The doors closed behind him. The click echoed like a punctuation mark on the lesson they would never forget. And as he disappeared from sight, remember, never underestimate anyone, and always respect the quiet strength of those around you. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more unbelievable, jaw-dropping moments like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that shocks and inspires. Because the next twist could be closer than you think.